right, what's up, everybody? My name is Sean Vaughn, and welcome to Champions Material. I'm glad to be here. As always, you all know, appreciate everyone who tuned into last week's episode. You guys really been showing me love, man. Really been supporting everything we're doing at Champions Material, and it means a lot, man. Y'all mean a lot. Throughout all Champions Material podcasts, you know we'll be introducing the topics we'll be diving into up front. So as they're being discussed throughout the pod, it gives you, the listener, the opportunity to think, form your ideas, perspective, and if there's questions, thoughts, any feedback you want to submit, shoot those over to us at champions.materialsv@gmail.com. It can only help grow this podcast. And trust me, all your feedback has consistently been helping to grow this podcast and make it better. Now, my thanks to all of you who tuned in to our episode, Hip Hop Volume 1, the 90s. Myself and Junior, my guest that day, and the man behind the sound of Champions Material. We received a lot of feedback, more feedback for that episode than any other episode by far. And it was mostly positive, no doubt. But man, we also definitely heard about the artists and some of the albums that we missed in that episode. I can still hear, Sean, where the hell was DMX and Rough Riders at? In the decade of the 90s, I still hear that ringing in my head to this day. My apologies. Through the audience's feedback, we confirmed what we thought going in, that it was impossible to cover an entire decade of classic hip hop in one episode. But it was fun, and there was no doubt about that. And I loved all you all's passion out there, letting us know where you were coming from and your thoughts. So guess what? We're doing it again. And this time, we're going into the decade of the 2000s. And we already know it's going to be tough. But here at Champions Material, we built for it. It's game time. Now, joining me to dive into all things hip-hop, rap, whatever you want to call it, in the decade of the 2000s is my guy. Been looking forward to having him on for a while to get into this and the music and the projects he's been working on. So welcome to Champions Material, my man, Andre Lewis. What's up, brother?
Man, chilling, man. It's good to be here. I see you doing good things. I like everything I've been here so far, man. Keep it moving. See how everything's going. I've been wanting to, for a while. I didn't want to interrupt you that entire time, but I'm sitting here like, all right, man. So I don't want to interrupt this man while I'm trying to let him get his moment in.
All right. We told y'all it's game time. So let's go ahead and highlight these topics and let's get into them. The definition. Dre and I will give you our take on the sound of hip hop, rap, again, whatever you want to call it, the music in the decade of the 2000s. What was our definition of hip hop in the 2000s? The artists. We're going to highlight some of the artists and the albums that stood out to us. And while we do that, what's yours? A cut above. We'll give you our artist of the decade of the 2000s and our album of the 2000s. So let's go ahead and get this thing started, man. And before we even get into the 2000s, I know you had an opportunity to listen down to the Volume 1, the decade of the 90s. Like I said, everybody has something to say. What were your thoughts, man? What you think?
So obviously I already had my thoughts simply being, you left people out of it. You left people out like DMX, you left out of it. You didn't get enough detail into certain things. Now for me, I'm going to say, where's the love for Mobb Deep, man? Where's the love for Mobb Deep?
Yeah.
Where's the love for Mobb Deep?
Yeah, I read more than a few emails.
You can't
yes.
that Mobb Deep's not in this list. You can't say he's not in here. And I'm not talking about a list of greatest all time. I'm talking about a list of being in the 90s, of being impactful, of being something worth talking about. Shook Ones was something special. Yeah. When that came out, that was something special. That beat was talked about, just let alone. And then now you talk about Prodigy, and then you don't have him at all. You don't mention them.
Yeah. Impossible.
I expected that though.
To cover.
I expected that though.
Decade.
Me and you've had conversations with Mobb Deep's concern, and I expected you to push them to the side, and talk about you.
You know what? So before we get into the 2000s, Dre, Mobb Deep, I'm sure that there are others. Yeah, sure. So when you think about hip hop in the 1990s, we covered them. We got back to them. But when you think about hip hop in the decade of the 90s, what is that to you?
For hip hop in the decades in the 90s?
Yeah, what is the sound of hip hop rap in the decade of the 90s? What did it mean to you?
What's the boom bap era? So for me, the sound is going to be around. See, I have a bias. Let's just get straight to the point. I'm going to have a bias a little bit because it's all going to circle around or center around New York. So obviously a lot of Nas at that time, a lot of Mobb Deep. Obviously, when you've talked about this plenty of time, Mobb Deep is a big influence for me. Definitely listening to a lot of music growing up.
Right.
So you can't tell me nothing when it comes to Mobb Deep. I know they had their flaws, obviously, but for me, you know, Survival of the Fittest, Shook Ones, Give Up the Goods, things like that. That sound to me is what incorporates the 90s.
Right.
That grittiness to it. You know, like you listen to the songs that even for the 2000s, there's a difference. There's a difference. I'm not saying that it doesn't hit the same. There's not that same impact, but we knew there was a transitional phase going on when we got to the 2000s, obviously with the South making its, rise up. People now paying attention to them a lot more. Outkast made their point in the 90s, and it definitely came true in the 2000s. What he said, the South had something to say. Yes. And that's what happened. But if you just
shout out to the Source Awards, yeah.
But if you're sticking just with the 90s itself, you can obviously throw the West Coast in there as well. I was listening to a lot of that. But the South, I can definitely say for me, I wasn't really. I mean, there was a few little bit of people for me that I listened to, Ghetto Boys, freaking Outkast with 80 Aliens. That was my joint when I was a kid, mind you. So I wasn't really sonically paying attention to him. But that's also because I had an older brother also who, being from New York, we were listening to East Coast, so boom bap. For us, that's everything, especially if you like to rap. If you can actually rap on a boom bap beat, then you can do that on anything. That's what it's meant for. It's meant for you to actually spit. It's meant for you to be heard. Right. So that's what it means for me.
Word. That's what's up, man. And I think we talked about it that in the decade of the 90s, it was about bars. It was about get the mic, get the beat, and go.
Right.
And I think the decade of the 90s, we talked about the fact that it was a fight coming into the decade of the 90s to be heard. Because again, coming into the 90s, it was, everybody with a statement, NWA, Public Enemy.
At least definitely for early 90s.
Yes, absolutely.
Coming off of the 80s, and that was...
But by the time we got to the end of the decade, and we hinted at this on the last episode, Volume 1, it was clear that if hip-hop was not clearly, it was arguably the most impactful from a cultural standpoint and popular standpoint, music genre, period. Like as we closed out the decade, so the importance of where we were coming from when we came in versus where we were as we were coming into the 2000s. Yeah. There was not a more, you could say maybe music or albums or certain artists were maybe better at other times.
Right.
But we believe, me and Junior believe, the 90s was the most important decade for hip hop. Would you agree?
I agree with that. It's the golden era. It's the golden era because it's also what started to transition from the old 80s party hip hop. That's what started the transition. Now, we knew it would start to transition, obviously, with Rakim and them, Big Daddy Kane. They were pushing it forward. But when we start to think about lyrical content with a message, conscious rap, whatever the case may be, everything that you think of that actually has meaning to it, all right? Not a party rap, anything like that. When we start to think about it, we think about the 90s. We do, because that's where we have artists like Jay, artists like Nas, artists like, if you want to throw Common in there, some people do throw Common. That's not a slight, but some people do throw them in there, Tabitha Kweli. We got a whole bunch of artists that we can start to name at this point that, they had the gritty stuff, they had their hood stuff, but they also still had a message behind a lot of this stuff. It don't matter who it was. Even DMX, we go down to the dude who's over here talking about heaven and hell. Yeah. He still had a message behind it. But if you jump back now and go to the 2000s, it starts to change a little bit more. It became more about a vibe. It became more about that energy, that how you feeling when you around people. Like, you looking at me funny. We about to get that mob aggression. That's how it was, like mosh pit.
Yes,
mosh pit aggression. That's kind of what it became, And I always felt like when you jump over to that side of it, it was more, to me, looking at it, the South really saying like, yo, we are really here with that aggression from music.
Yes.
That aggression. That's the South saying we're here right now. So you could definitely see where the impact really was in the 90s of bringing everything full circle to start getting South rappers who can rap lyrically.
Absolutely.
We can't forget guys like T.I., guys like Luda, guys like Jeezy, who still paid attention to these guys who paved the way. Because you can't say that these guys can't rap. You can't say that they didn't pay attention to it. They even say it themselves. So you can't say the 90s isn't impactful. It has two of the most influential hip hop artists of all time still to this decade. What can you say? I mean, yeah, you got 2010s with Drake. That's not a slight against him, but when we really talk about it, and we're really saying like, okay, GOATs, we're not putting Drake in there.
No.
Because it's still that questionnaire, like, though, it's not your material, 100%. You still got some, but it's not your material.
Yes.
When we look at a Pac, when we look at a Big, there was emotion behind it. There was a movement behind it. There was impact behind it. There was more to
life experience behind it.
Exactly. It was more to it than just, all right, the latest wave that you caught from the next guy. You know, you buddy hopping now. You just saw the X guy, and you're like, yo, I like what you got. I like your shoes.
Right.
Never mind now.
Yeah.
Never mind. We're not doing the culture vulture thing. So if you jump back to that, like I said, the impact is a lot more impactful. That's what it's about. Golden era.
I talked about this on Volume 1.
Mm-hmm.
My definition of hip hop is what it does to me as far as how I feel and how it grabs you.
Right.
I felt like the sound of the 90s was, we fighting, we ain't going nowhere. You can't kick us out. By the time we got to the 2000s, we told y'all, you ain't kicking us out. Y'all love us.
Right.
Check the numbers.
Right.
Check the impact.
Right.
Culturally, just on these streets. We talking black, white, and everything in between. Fuck y'all, we flexing. And I felt like you talked about how it just got crunk.
Yeah.
You know, from everywhere. MOP was bringing it that way. Obviously, the South was bringing it that way. West, we already know. I mean, West was bringing it that way since the late 80s.
Well, if we talk in 2000, I remember West Side fell off for a little bit. They did fall for about 5 years. They had 5 years that they weren't doing nothing.
Yeah.
So we have to actually put that into a fact. So if we're going to put that into a fact, that it really was just the South and East Coast.
And because Chronic 2001 was technically 99?
Yeah.
Am I all right, somebody out there let me know.
Forgot about Drake. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it was
Aftermath. So can we say, okay, yeah, they definitely had a couple of years post Pac, and then when Snoop went down there to New Orleans with No Limit, it was a vacuum there for a while. But when we say that Chronic 2001 brought that sound back and brought the West,
no,
we're not going there.
No, because okay, so with that being said, who followed right after that movement? Who followed it? Because Game came in 2005. When did that album drop again?
1999.
So who followed?
You talked about it, about a 5-year gap there.
So who followed after that? Because I'm not going to say Exhibit. I'm not saying Exhibit.
We can't.
I don't think he's a
with
bad
all due
artist.
respect. With all due respect, we can't.
Exactly, he's not a bad artist at all. But you can't throw Exhibit in it because by this time he's Pimp My Ride. He's the Pimp My Ride guy. Yeah. So we can't count him. So who else you have? You got E40. But E40's never been that guy for the East Coast. The West Coast, yeah. These West Coast Jay-Z, they always like to say. Right. But for the East Coast, nah, I mean, tell me when to go.
Yeah, I mean, E40, was still E40. Exactly. Too Short was still Too Short. But I understand where you're coming from. Corrupt, highly underrated in my view, just true. As an artist and as a lyricist. But again, there was not the guy there for a while. And, the Game came in, and no matter how you feel about him, he came in and he filled that vacuum.
Game definitely came in and filled the vacuum because the documentary is a very impactful album, especially for 2005.
Yes.
Especially for that time, at that time period. I mean, now we already know what album came out around that time. Actually, there's a lot of it. The Carter came out that year too, right? 2005, the first one. Yeah, Massacre was the year before? Was that also 2005? I think that was
Massacre
2005 as well, right?
Was it 5 or 6? It was in that same. It was in that same era.
It definitely was.
Give or take a year.
Yeah, six definitely, because we know Curtis came out like 2007. I remember not being a year.
Curtis.
It had to be. I think it was like 2 years. I want to say definitely 2003 was Get Rich or Die Trying. Massacre, I want to say it was 2005, and then Curtis was 2007. Definitely, I remember that. I remember working at Food Line.
So you know, you know what I'm saying? Getting that work, man. Doing what you had to do. We all been there.
Hey.
And ironically, we are indirectly, really going into, again, the definition. We talked about it. We just came in, and I think the decade of 2000s was y'all love us. Fuck it, we flexing.
Yeah.
We earned the right to do so.
And they did.
And to this day, many people consider the decade of the 2000s not the most important. We talked about the 90s being the most important. But, and you just say quality of music, artists, albums, the whole nine. People will say, most people say the decade of the 2000s. So now we just highlighted some of the artists, but when you think about the decade of the 2000s, Dre, what are the artists to you that defined that decade?
Well, you got to throw 50 in there.
Okay.
50 is going to immediately be in there because Get Rich or Die Trying, to let alone set a tone for the rest of the entire decade, you might as well say, because it came out in 2003. No one was able to accomplish what he did with that one album.
Yes.
It set a tone. So I remember mad interviews when I was in my teens at the time watching this, and everybody was nervous. Even Jay was nervous. That's the whole reason why he took the retirement. It was like, yo, man, y'all better watch out for 50. So it's like you had to throw 50 in there. T.I. is going to go in there as well because Urban Legends is something to talk about. The King album is something to talk about. Themes are something to talk about. That's something that you have to mention. Luda, I feel you need to throw him in there because he doesn't get the respect that he rightfully deserves.
Why not? Man?
I think it's because of the fact that a lot of the raps that he put out. All right, so if we really talk about it, a lot of raps he put out, we still see him as the goofy rapper. We don't see him
the punchline guy.
The punchline guy, but it's gonna be goofy punchlines. We don't say that about Lloyd Banks.
True.
And he's the punchline king that we keep calling him.
True.
But we're not sitting here saying, "Oh man, that was okay." I hear what you're saying, but all right, that was a little goofy with how you said that. Okay, what was it? Was it Blueberry Yum? What was that?
Yeah, sounds about right.
Yeah, it wasn't a bad song. Lyrically, it was on point, but it's still the goofiness behind it that still made. And you guys can say it's the goofiness behind it.
Right.
Now you put that, and we have to do this because at the time period, definitely. I mean, you had your Batman, you had your Superman. It was Luda, it was T.I. because that was the whole thing with Stomp.
Yes.
You remember that they had their little beef. So if you're incorporating that right there, T.I. was everything that you would want because T.I. wasn't on the goofy stuff. T.I. was making stuff that you can rock to, you can chill to, you can do whatever you want to. I mean, I'm just doing my job right there is a perfect example of a song that you could just vibe to. But then you can go back and then you could do songs like, ASAP. You can do ASAP right there, or you can do Bring 'Em Out after that if you want.
Bring 'em out.
You could do Big Things Popping. You could do a whole bunch of stuff. I'm just jumping around purposely because of the fact that this is to incorporate the fact that you can have multiple versions of Tip. Whether you want to do early 2000s all the way to the end of the 2000s, going into the 2010s, you can say that. You can even go back to the I'm Serious album if you get that a chance.
Yeah.
And that was early 2000s. So you can do that. You can still do it with Luda as well because his first two albums are still, in my opinion, I think should be classics. If not,
Chicken and Beer to you is a classic.
Hold on. Let me remember. I gotta remember the stuff that's on there because this is also now taking my bias out of the equation of what I usually listen.
You talked about that shit at the beginning.
And I stress that because a lot of the stuff that I listen to is a lot of East Coast stuff. So it is a lot of New York or, a lot of Jersey, a lot of that area is what I'm listening to the most, but it's because of the content. I can relate to it a lot more. And that's just how it's going to be usually. So I can't do nothing about that. But,
you know what, man?
Yeah.
I was going to try to wait to get into this, and I can't wait any longer.
Here we go.
And ironically, this man had an album called The Massacre because that's exactly what he did. Of course, there have been other examples of this, particularly throughout the, hip hop rap history, again, whatever you want to call it. There has not been a more prominent example, in my opinion, before or since of one man killing, destroying, ending another man's career.
I see where you're going here.
As 50 did to Ja.
Where's Ja?
Rule. What happened, man?
Yo, there's documentaries that go on that go deeper than me, but I'm not surprised that what happened to Ja happened to him. If you go through the history, just knowing everything that was behind that, I'm not surprised. 50 had a better engine behind him. 50 had a better background story behind him. 50 had better music to support the background story that he was going with. I'm sorry, Many Men, there's no competition if you put Many Men up to the majority of Ja songs. I can't think of a Ja song I'm gonna put over Many Men. And that's not a slight against him, because the older I've gotten, I care more about quality than quantity, you know? So we do know that Ja has quality. There's nothing you can take away from that man. The songs that people get always play for him, always there on time, things like that. You can't take that from that man, because they still knock today. They really do. You can throw that on and just get a bottle, you know, especially if you got your lady over, she wanted to, whatever, let her rock to that.
Understood.
So you can't knock that from him. But when you're talking about the energy, you're talking about the impact, you're talking about the aggression, you're talking about even the charismatic nature that 50 had.
Yeah.
There was nothing that you can even say. And then now you put the engine of Dr. Dre and Eminem behind that too. And you have Aftermath, you even have some of Flip Mode.
Yeah.
Because you had Bus jump in there too.
Ron Digger. Had to get it right now. Sorry.
Yes. You hear me? So
Pharaoh.
So just incorporating everything I said, there was just no way for Ja to be able to come back.
Now, I've had conversations, and I've actually seen this discussed in other places as well, that 50 called him when Ja was slowly, he had, after the first joint where it was obviously more gritty at him, Ashanti, him, Christina Milian, him, and whoever at the time. It was a, J-Lo, I'm real, okay.
Right.
He was on the run of doing that, and it was getting to the point where it was like, come on now. And so it was a vulnerability, and it was sort of a fatigue of what he was doing, even though they were commercially successful. They was getting radio play, right?
Right.
But there was some fatigue to it, and 50 came in. And then he came in, as you mentioned, with one of the most impactful albums of all time, and took it back to the street, much like how DMX had done years earlier, where it was kind of getting shiny and kind of pop. And then all of a sudden, DMX came in and took it back to the street. 50 did the same thing. So it was that combination where it was like, okay.
I agree with that. I think it was fatigue. I also think it was also the fact that he didn't have a strong team. If you want to be honest, and this is not talking about what they did in the streets, credibility, whatever the case may be, just musically. If you want to talk musically, your team, Murder Inc. by itself, when we think of Murder Inc., we're primarily thinking of John Ashanti.
True.
And then when we start to move out of that, some people may think Black Child. Some people may, because they may know the actual story. So they're going to know, okay, well, we remember he was the one that shanked up 50.
Right.
But you don't remember any songs, but you remember the incident.
Right.
So it's one of those things. Now you flip it to the other side. Now, the other end of the spectrum, we go to 50 side. You know what thinks. You don't care about Yayo, but you know Yayo.
You know who he is.
You know who he is. You know who Buck is. You know who Game is. I would even throw Olivia in there. You know who Olivia is. But that's where the list ends. That's where the list ends. Most people know Olivia because of Candy Shop.
Yes.
Now tell me anybody else out of that. That's where it ends. Spider Lope, most people aren't going to remember him.
No.
What was it? Hot Rod? No one's remembering him. I didn't even realize he jumped over to the pop side. I thought he was just gone after whatever. Be Easy with Mary J.
Yeah.
That song right there. I was like, yo, this is super formulaic. But having them compared to Murder Inc., it's just not a competition. You got to have a strong team to back up the music that you're putting out and the representation that you're showing.
Right.
And the representation, like you said, fatigue, having all those female songs that you were putting out, or I don't want to just say female songs, but just having those, relaxed type, chill vibe type of songs did make you vulnerable, because you did start putting a lot more female presence into your songs, into your videos, showcasing a more softest side of you. So
yes,
it's gonna take a toll. Now you tell me, and keep in mind, I'm a young kid, so I'm a perfect example of the demographic at the time. So you talk a young kid, you're talking, that was like 2001, 2002, around that time when they were really going at it, had 11, 12 right there. My mind's immediately going to 50, like, nah, 50's that dude. Why am I going to listen to Ja over here talking about whatever? I don't want to hear that. I'm not trying to hear that.
Enough with that, man.
Yeah, we're talking as a kid too. So as a kid, I don't want to hear that. I want to hear the dudes who's talking about like really getting busy. So you got Wayne Style at this time. So I'm like, okay. Okay.
Anthem.
And again, we got to remember, I'm 12. 12 hearing this song. And they got the job toy and everything with the chain. I still remember that joint. I remember also I was a kid, like, that joint kind of fly, yo. that joint, he had the chain and everything. Like, that joint kind of fly. I don't know what they're talking about, man. That joint kind of fresh. But nah, I remember seeing that video and immediately saying, like, yo, this is that dude right here.
Yeah.
Because the presentation was everything. It was like, yo, as a young dude, we moved down to the South. But a young dude looking at everything from New York as a dude down here, I'm still like imagining this stuff, like relating to these guys and still connecting to them because, he's still talking about fish out of water situation, So 50 was the bridge. He was the bridge. Nah, it's 50. You talking about a kid from Queens.
Right.
They're from Queens. That's the bridge for me. Ja was like, you from Queens too, but you from that side. You from that side. You from Corona, Queens or something, man. You from Corona, Queens or something, man. Like you in a different zone. Like
you 10 blocks down, bro.
Yeah, you from
like we're aware, but
you from that side around the block.
10 blocks down.
Yeah.
Right.
You with them. You with them. He with you with them. Like it's one of those situations,
Yeah, absolutely. Now, we talked about some of the artists, that define the 2000s for you.
Yeah.
Now, let's talk about some of those albums, man. When you think of the decade of the 2000s, what albums stood out to you then and still mean something to you now?
All right, so if we're gonna do this, if we're gonna really do this for me, we already talked about two of the guys already. So T.I. already was in the list and 50's in the list. It's hard for me. I couldn't choose one. That's the thing. Like when it comes,
so this exactly. It's the thing. It's tough. So the albums, that
like
really,
the albums that really stood out for me. Well, I can tell you one immediately, and this is gonna throw a lot of people off. It was actually Jim Jones. Jim Jones' Diary of the Summer. Harlem Diary of the Summer. That was one of my favorite albums. I remember being 16 when that came out.
Speak to that, man.
Yeah, I was 16 when that came out. Me and my brother, doing the stuff that we do at the time. And I remember always bumping that. I was in high school at the time, chilling with a couple of my boys, SD and everybody. And that was always the thing we played. Was that one in America's Nightmare from Mobb Deep? So we played those a lot. But Confront You Babe on Jim Jones's Harlem Diary of the Summer, the Harlem joint that was on there. You had Baby Girl on there. You had Honey Dip on it. That was a dope album. Yeah. It was underrated though. It was underrated, but I expected it because that was Jim Jones' second album. Jim Jones at that time was still the hype guy. We didn't see him as anything until Ballin'.
Right.
When Ballin' came out, it was like, oh, now I know who you are. You're Jim Jones.
Absolutely.
I see you. Absolutely. I see you. You got the money. That's why I know you now because you're Ballin'. I see you, big dog. So
the fat pockets.
Exactly. So Jim Jones, Harlem Diary of the Summer, that's one of them. Like I said, Get Rich or Die Trying, Urban Legends is one as well. Hunger for More was another one for me.
Okay.
Hunger for More definitely at the time period. I was coming out of, my little situation at the time, 13, 14, coming out of that situation. I remember the Hunger for More coming out at that time. I remember hearing On Fire. And this is actually, like, at this time period, a lot of this music reflects to particular moments. Obviously, we've had this conversation about some of the things that's happened when I was younger.
We have.
And you had Hunger for More, 2003, 2004. I remember that because he had On Fire out. And I remember hearing that in the place I was at, and I used to love that song, but it was that and Graduation.
Ooh.
Graduation has to be said, because again, this is still around the same time period. So I remember I was going up to the mountains. It was a mountain trip thing for the camp thing. So I'm out here going to the mountains. I remember hearing All Falls Down. First time I was like, what is this right here? I was like, because I'm a stickler for hearing, actual instruments if you put them in there. If you put a guitar in there, I'll listen to it. If you got a good riff going, even if you a bass guitar, I don't care. As long as you're letting it be known that you're there, like your presence is known. It felt. Yes. Not just you're there, you're just like, yo, please, someone snip the cables. You know, someone cut this. You know what I'm saying? Like, turn to a wrestler, just hit that man. You know, that Jeff Jarrett stuff, that old school, just right out of here. You know, but yeah. Just speaking of that, anyway, with the instrumentals, that leads me to another album, Becoming, being a Seagull. That was another one of my joints listened to as a young guy.
Philly Zone, yes.
Yeah, so again, around this time period, it's really hard to mark exactly the joints, but if I did, it really would have to be Harlem Diary for Summer, because of the fact I remember many nights listening to that. The girl I was dating at the time, Courtney, with her, I was listening to that all the time. My homie SD at the time was listening to that always. My brother definitely, when we was always going, out.
Stayed on rotation.
Yeah, that was the song that was on rotation. Tupac joint, all that stuff on there. So that was like the album for me of that time, So yeah, that list is crazy, because America's Nightmare, that right there, we up. That was my joint, man. Like, I can still listen to him to this day, but I can't forget Lupe as well. I can't forget Lupe. I can't forget the Cool.
He'll be coming up. Cool.
But those are the ones I would say for me that really speak to me as like that's the era for me. I'm sure there's more, but as a standout, Jeezy as well. I forgot because Soul Survivor was my joint when I was that was my, and Go Crazy was the one that made me start liking Jeezy. I didn't like Jeezy prior to that.
Why not?
They always say, first time it matters. Your first impression matters. I didn't like, what was the song he had where he started off, it was like patty cake, bacon cakes. I hated that so much. And you got to remember the era.
Not quite Snowman yet. I got you.
And you got to remember the era. No one was doing that yet. That style of dragging it and sounding like you're kind of harmonized, but you ain't really harmonized. This is how you sound.
Yeah,
but
somewhere in between.
Baker's Man, all that stuff. This is still the 50 era. What is this? You know what I'm saying? What is this? What are we hearing here? But Soul Survivor is what started to change my opinion about it.
Yeah, Soul Survivor.
What Go Crazy remix with Jay is what did it.
Okay.
Yeah, that remix
was a game changer for you.
That remix was fire because he held his own. He did. With
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You knew he was still there. You knew he was still in the building.
Yeah.
Now, you had mentioned something earlier, and we got to get into it. You talked about Jim Jones, the Diplomats, Dipset, however you want to. Why are the Dipset so? All of them, all of them. Why are they so polarizing? You can get one opinion going one way where you saying they're one of the most underrated, and depending on who you talk to, you can get another opinion from another group telling you how overrated they are. Why are they so polarizing? Why is it such a?
It's because they incorporate everything. They incorporate everything. Style, flair, that hood mentality, that gangster mentality. They incorporate everything. You had 3 members as your predominant members. You had the fly guy Cameron.
Yes.
You couldn't even say nothing about this man. This man came out in pink with a fur. And no one said it.
He said, deal with it.
And no one was like, go back. No one said that. So you had him. Then you had your boy Jim Jones, the gangster in the group. He was the capo. He was everything. He was the muscle. So it was like, okay, you incorporated that. And then you had the young boy. You had the young boy Jewels, come up, the bar guy. That was the guy with the lyrics right there.
Yeah.
You incorporated everything. And then obviously, if you want to throw the 4th member, Freaky Zeke, even though he didn't really do anything musically, if you still throw him in there, that was the hype man. That was the hype man. He got everything going. After Jim Jones definitely became a rapper, he became the hype man for real.
Right.
So adding that, and then you also got to put in the major part is their sound. No one had a sound like that. But like them, the Heat Makers and Dipset, that's just together because there's no sound like that. That high pitched sound with like women singing in the background, and then the high pitched beats and stuff like what was it, Loving Me? That joint. That's a perfect example of the Heat Maker classic type of joint right there. it doesn't matter which version you use, the Freeway one or the Jim Jones one. That style has yet to come back, and it won't. There's no way it can come back. I mean, you had people in New York wanting to be Dipset. Even people in the South wanted to be Dipset. Again, this is the time period of me being a kid. I remember, matter of fact, one of my homeboys when I was a kid, growing up, this dude, I remember told me, he was like, yo, when Cameron was big and everything, it was like, he was like, yo, I like Dipset. I'm from Harlem now. This dude was from Germany, mind you.
Okay.
He was from Germany, military father and everything. Right. From Germany, but he's like, yo, I'm from Harlem. We like 12. I'm sitting there like, all right, whatever, bro. I'm actually from Queens, but whatever. Right. Let's say you're from Harlem.
It's your world, boss.
Yeah, you ain't gonna have a voice. You haven't even, your balls haven't dropped yet. Like, you're not even gonna sound like like, what are we talking about? Like, you really want to say you're from here? No one's gonna believe you. You need more people. You know what I'm saying?
Don't believe you. You need more people.
You see what I'm saying? It's not possible.
Yeah.
It is what it is.
Oh, shit. Now, you know what, man?
What's up, man?
We talked about this on the Hip Hop Volume 1, the 90s. We had to spotlight No Limit Records. And about a 4-year run that they had at the end of the 90s where they cranked out, albums and quality albums, mind you. It wasn't no bullshit. Quality albums for about a 3-year stretch. C Murder, Silk, obviously P, Mac, Fiend, Mia X, Servon. I can go. They cranked it out. But we saw by the end of the decade, okay, this thing was slowing down. Like this could not be sustained. And right behind them, Cash Money Records, man.
Right.
And in the decade of the 2000s, when you're listening to the Hot Boys and you listening to one of the more impactful albums to this day, 400 Degrees, Juvenile, and you back that ass up, obviously, to this day. You know what I mean? Definitely get. And when you listening to they were coming in the decade of 2000s. If someone would have told you in 2002 when you listening to the Hot Boys, you listening to Turk, BG, Juvenile was definitely the guy, the breakout guy. Yeah. If someone would have told you that without question, the most prominent and important member of that group would be the youngest one, what would you have said? Did you see Wayne becoming? We're not talking today. We talking the decade of the 2000s, the run he had. Did you see Wayne being Wayne? What did you see?
I can say that not to the extent of where he went to, but yes, I can see him going. You could, because you gotta remember, Bling Bling came out when?
That was BG's joint. That was what, 2003? No. It was still 2000. It was still 2000. It was 2001.
It was like it was around that.
Okay.
So we're talking 2000s. A lot of people remember Wayne's part, and they remember Wayne's part.
Right.
They remember that. Wayne had star power immediately from the beginning.
So he stood out.
He stood out. There's no way we couldn't say that Wayne wasn't going to go anywhere.
Right.
Now, to the extent of where he went to, the heights of what he went to, no one could have predicted that.
Okay.
That's just impossible. I feel like certain people you can kind of get a vibe like, okay, yeah, you're gonna take off. Like,
right.
I do feel like people like 50. I do feel like they were destined to do it, but that's because of the background that follows with the music that you're putting. Right. If you're just saying the music alone and there wasn't a background to follow with it, not so much, probably not. But you got to imagine now it's all about the character. It's like we're watching a movie. Even though it's real life, we're watching a movie. We're watching characters on the screen as our entertainment, and we're seeing them do these things. So it's like, okay, well, I don't really care about Batman if he ain't lose his parents. What are we talking about?
Right. What are we doing?
Exactly. Well, we're gonna watch this man become an accountant in Wayne Towers or something like that. He's gonna sell property to
finance
Joker?
Consultant? What are we doing here?
Yeah, exactly. Right, sell property to Joker later. Like, come on, I don't want to see this. This is boring. We need his parents to get murdered. That's just what it has to be before we get the actual story and the character that a lot of people like. Right. It's the same thing with the 50s. It's the same thing with I would even throw a T.I. in there. A T.I. works in there because You Know Me was all about his whole struggles coming up. So you can use him. Luda, even though it wasn't as bad, you can still use his background because of the fact it's still interesting hearing someone come from the radio station and then become a rapper and then become someone who is a student of the game and became a lyricist that people do respect. That is still a story we can go off of. Now, if you're just some dude who just came out of nowhere, we never heard nothing from you, there's no background story to you whatsoever, it's just, you just a blank slate, no one's going to remember you. No one's going to remember you. What's going to make you different to stand out from the next person? That's what's going to happen at the end of the day. And we saw plenty of people like that. We had people like, what you had, Archie, We Ready? We had that. That was, I like that song back in the day, but that was a 2000 song and an artist that came and went. You know, we didn't hear nothing from him, even though the dude that I'm going to mention next, he passed away recently, but what was his name? Huey, the pop rock and drop it?
Yeah.
One song again.
Right.
You had the young boy Jibs, the chain hang low. Out of here.
Yeah.
What's bringing us to you? You know, it's the same thing that you bring up with the whole Champions material. You know, you bring up that positive energy, things like that, but you're also talking about presenting yourself.
Yes.
You got to present yourself. You got to do something. If I'm not presenting myself to you, what's going to make you remember me tomorrow or even 5 minutes from now? Because you could be thinking about food like, yo, man, my baby's starving. My baby's starving. You over here telling me your life story. It's getting good in your eyes, but to me, it's looking like a trailer that's not interesting. I'm like, yo, this is.
You know what it's like when you have that left wrist and you go be looking at that watch.
I'm
like,
saying
okay.
the battery not even turned on, but you just like you tapping shadows.
Yeah.
Make it seem like the light glare is gonna help. Like just I'm gonna catch it off the light. Maybe that'll make it seem like it's turned on.
What are we doing?
You see what I'm saying?
It's it's about impact, man. And I think I did not see Wayne becoming Wayne. I agree with you that I saw that there was definitely something there.
Yeah, it's potential. Yeah.
But did I see, especially the decade, and they just re-released actually No Ceiling. They missed some tracks off of it, but they just re-released that. And I went back and ran through that. And I said, man, this motherfucker was killing it, man.
He was
killing the game at that particular time.
He's what's
his best album? I still say Carter 3. There you go.
Carter 3.
There you go.
Carter 3 easy. There's no denying that. Now, I can't even. I like Carter 2. I like the first 3 Carter albums.
Okay.
Right. I didn't care for Carter 4 too much. I didn't think Carter 5 was bad. I thought Carter 5 actually was pretty good.
Okay.
You know, even though it came out a little too late, obviously we know the reasons why that everything happened.
Yeah.
I felt like if it came out at the right time, we would feel different about it. But I do feel like that was a moment in time for that one. You know, Carter 3, I can still listen to a million. I can still listen to that. I can still listen to that.
Okay.
It's because of how it started and everything. I like anything that you have a build up to it. It had a build up to it. Mr. Carter, come on, man. That right there, that's enough said right there, just on that. You know,
consider it done.
Yeah, and then after that, for me, I know after that, Wayne became irrelevant to me because that's when he started trying to be a rock star and all that stuff. He became Tony Hawk, and I was like, I'm good. All right, Tony, we good. All right. So I passed on him after that.
Now, specifically had to make sure that I set aside some time for this young man. I hinted at the fact that we were going to discuss him because you do not discuss the decade of the 2000s. And we understand where he is now, and, you know, we pulling for the brother. But in the decade of the 2000s, we talked about, did you see it coming with Wayne? I didn't. When you heard this young brother, we obviously got to know him as a producer first.
Right.
And then all of a sudden, we were starting to get some features. I'm talking about, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about a young man by the name of Kanye West. Did you, when you heard him early, before College Dropout, did you see Kanye becoming Kanye? Did you see that one coming?
Before College Dropout?
Before.
Nah. Because I didn't even know who Kanye was then.
Wow.
Again, you got to keep in mind early 2000s. Early 2000s,
He's a producer.
He's a producer, and I'm a young kid. I don't know nothing about all that. And I just know whoever's on the song. If it's someone I like, cool. I know that song because it's on the radio at the time. This is before YouTube and everything, obviously.
Right.
So that's it. I don't know who Kanye is. And, you know, now I go back and I listen. And I'm like, oh, you did this. I didn't know you did this. Like, what? Guess Who's Back? Scarface.
Yes.
Never knew that was him the entire time. And now I'm like, yo, that's still one of my favorite beats of all time. That one beat is one of my favorite beats of all time. Never knew that was Kanye. So, you know, I wouldn't be able to say that I saw it coming. I still don't particularly get why it came, to be honest with you, just 100%. To be honest with you, I do like his first 3 albums. That's not to discredit those. But to see the transition of what he used to do to what he's doing now, it's like, yo, this is just two different people. Two different people. So the Kanye I grew up on, I still like, and that's where it ends. So, you know, college dropout all the way to graduation, and then I'm done. We clean my hands with it.
My Beautiful Dark Twisted, you're out.
Good. 808s and Heartbreaks, I'm good. You know,
The Life of Pablo, you out.
Life of Pablo, I'm good. Now, I was good when he said he was bleaching people's assholes and stuff. I was good. You know,
yeah,
I'm not with it. That's just not my thing. So I tend to like the Kanye back in the day because there was more meaning to what he was saying, and there was more feeling behind what he was saying. I know obviously his mother was still around and stuff at the time, but it was just a different
shout out to Don that we know what that what that meant to him, man.
Yeah, there's a different vibe to how he brought it. You know, you can't even tell me that Graduation sounds anything close to 808s and Heartbreaks. I mean, we know that obviously instrumental wise it's different because he's using more 808s at this time.
Right.
But even off of that, just the topic value, what he was going about, it became super emotional after that. You know, and then I felt like he started getting into his head too much. He started becoming something that the world didn't see him as, but he saw himself as, as a god and things like that. I'm like, good, man. The ego took over, and that's when I started feeling like the music became an ego-driven type of thing, just to show you, like, look how great I am. So I didn't really care about the music after that when it came to him. Prior to Graduation, or just Graduation and previous, all of those felt like he was just trying to represent who he truly was in the best way possible.
I got you.
But soon as we know what happened, I feel like the filter was taken out, and then he lost the meaning of who he was, and it just became an ego trip. And I just don't care about that. I haven't liked any of the Kanye projects really that's come out ever since. And it's not that I don't give him a chance. It just doesn't sonically sound the same to me. You know, from Jesus Walks all the way up to Good Life, and now you bring up those, just everything that encompasses that. Now you bring it to what he brings now. It just doesn't compete. It doesn't have that same feel.
Doesn't have that same feel, man.
Yeah.
And we talk about the decade of the 2000s, and I got to bring another guy up and his crew too. We'll definitely, touch on them as well. Now to, the young cats today, I say Nelly, they go, who? I go Saint Lunatics, they go, what? That's the dude. That's the dude that had the shoe song, right? I'm like, oh my god.
Well,
what? Okay. What the fuck, man?
Well, he did that to himself, though. He did that to himself. He started out like, all right, we already knew he was country, obviously. We knew this. Right. He always had that country flair to him. I mean, you go back to, what was it? Going down, baby. That joint. But that was an EI. I can't remember what it was called right now. It's slipping my mind right now. And it's actually a song I like too. But you go off of that to Ride With Me as the best example, especially Ride With Me. Yeah. That was as country as it got. So when he finally transitioned over in about like 2005, 2006 with All in My Head, that's right.
I think about it over and over again.
That's right. Yeah. It wasn't a surprise to me. I didn't think it was a surprise.
So you weren't surprised at all? You saw this one coming? Like,
I saw it coming, man.
In boxing terms, these were the punches you saw coming the whole time.
But you just got to listen to how he was doing a lot of things at this time. Again, Ride With Me is a perfect example of it. He was leaning towards this. And then you keep in mind, further from that point, he kept doing more and more singing type of songs. And then by the time it got to the Tim McGraw stuff, we've already gone through Dilemma and all this other stuff by this time. Yeah. So we're already here. What was more of a surprise to me at that time period was the fact that he put Grills out, which threw me off because he was singing at this time, doing the whole Dilemma. And then, we know what he's doing now with like Dropping Miss Daisy and Daisy, Portia. That's it, Portia. So it's like he's doing all that stuff. So it didn't surprise me. Grills is the one that surprised me because of the fact that closing out the 2000s era, Nelly wasn't like he was in the early 2000s with I Am Number One and just Nellyville in general. Nellyville, he's just not the same. Right. He got to, Sweat and Soup or something like that.
And that was the album that had that joint with Tim McGraw.
It had the Tim McGraw joint and it had Grills. And it was the two separate.
Yeah.
And I remember the one, I think it was Sweat. I think it was, or was it Soup? it was one of them. I think it was Suit. That was the one that did better. That was the hip hop joint. That was the one that had Grills on. It was like, yeah, that's not surprising because Grills was actually a good song. I remember that beat was tough. The energy was tough. I remember everything about that, listening to it. But then you put Tim McGraw out at the same time. And it's like, what are we doing here? What am I supposed to feel right now? I'm going all over the place. Like 1 minute we hear, and now I'm in my head. I just had Grills, and now I'm in my head.
Couldn't do it.
Too much stuff is going on up here.
Couldn't do it.
We got to stop.
Couldn't do it. You know what, man? We can't, Murphy Lee, the Lunatics, we can't act like they didn't have some joints that we was, rock, bobbing our heads to. But in the end, it was just too damn much, man. Just couldn't do it. All right, here we go. You knew this was coming. First, if you can only pick one, and trust me, you dropped some jewels, but you knew this. No, my brother.
What is this?
You knew this was coming, man. First, Dre. If you could only pick one album in the decade of the 2000s, what is Andre's album of the decade of the 2000s and why? You can only pick one.
I can only pick one.
Only pick one.
Only one. See, now this is going to be a tough one because of the fact I got to incorporate. I need something that's going to be universal because I'm not going to always want to hear some gangster stuff all the time. It's just not going to be the case.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to want to hear 100% straight R&B, but I may want to hear a little bit in there, so I might have to have a little bit of a vibe to it, a little something that at least make me feel like I ain't being super sentimental now, I don't want to be in that type of vibe,
right?
I don't want to be in the cupcakey vibe and there ain't nothing happening. That's pointless.
Yes.
So,
mm-hmm.
I don't even want to go with this answer, but I'm starting to feel like it's starting to just go straight to that point because there's going to be a decent amount of songs I can at least go to. But you know what? No, I know which one. I know.
Here we go, drum roll.
This is where it becomes tough, though. This is where it becomes tough because these two artists, it's so easy. But if I had to choose, I think it would be Jay-Z's Black Album. I think it would be Black Album.
Ooh.
I think it would be. Because if I'm just incorporating every single thing I just said, right? You want to have some gangster stuff. You want to have that flashy, you just that dude talk. You want to have some, some chill vibe, mellowed out, relaxed vibe. That incorporated everything I can think of. I'm thinking of Lucifer. I'm thinking about, a moment of clarity. I'm thinking about Encore. I'm thinking about Dirt Off Your Shoulders. I'm thinking about all these songs on here. So it may ever be Black Album, but I feel like that's so tough, man. That's such a tough one because it could have been Get Rich or Die Trying. It could have been Stillmatic for me. It could have been these albums, and that's the one that was really the toss-up was Stillmatic and Encore. Not Encore, but Black Album.
Mm-hmm.
I still feel like I'm kicking myself a little bit because I do feel like I'm leaning more towards Stillmatic just because of the content level on how I'm gonna want it. Because songs like You're the Man and things like that, I'm gonna want to hear that vibe.
Right.
That chill moment, especially if I'm getting medicated at the time and I'm just, I'm vibing. I just need to hear something like that. But both of them can do the same thing. So, that's a loaded question, man. That's
you knew it was coming, man.
That's loaded.
It was a straight right hand. You knew it was coming.
Yeah, I knew it was coming, but I didn't want to.
All right, so you get a Stillmatic Black Album. Which is it gonna be, man? Which is it gonna be? Your album of the decade of the 2000s is?
Nah, you know what? Nah, I have to just go with it. Nah, I have to go with it. It's Get Rich or Die Trying.
Oh.
It is.
Okay.
It is because I'm also thinking about the fact of just beginning to end. If I'm just wanting to listen to songs from beginning to end and not feel like I have to skip anything.
Yeah. Okay.
That's just what it was. Like yeah, it has to be Get Rich or Die Trying, because I can't think of albums, even though I like, Harlem Diary of the Summer. I like The Cool. I like, Food and Liquor. I like these albums. I like the King album. The King album I can listen to front and back too. I can't listen to the King album front and back. But if it's gonna be between the two, I'm going with Get Rich or Die Trying. I am. Patiently waiting. Shine Like Me. What's it called? In the Club.
Mm-hmm.
Even I would probably pass In the Club at this point. But, I'll probably
it's your birthday.
Yeah, I'll probably skip past it at this point. Same thing with 21 Questions. I'll probably skip at this point as well. But if it came on, I wouldn't be upset about it.
Right.
It's one of those type of songs, So yeah, that's yeah.
Okay. 50 Cent, Get Rich or Die Trying. You heard it here on Champions Material.
I should have put the second story, but yeah.
Look, man, and I knew this was coming, obviously, And it was just as hard for me. Another Hove album, American Gangster, really, really spoke to me, particularly at that point. I personally consider American Gangster to be a classic album. I know many don't, and for those who don't, I've heard their arguments. I understand where they're coming from. To me, that is a classic album. Not his best album, by no means.
Definitely in his top.
But it is definitely in the it's one of those in the conversation joints.
I agree.
College Dropout is the most probably important. It is the most important album that Kanye did. Late Registration was and remains my top Kanye West album, point blank period.
I can see that.
So again, I definitely thought about those two. Fallen is a timeless track that speaks to me from American Gangster, among obviously many others. And we talked about Wayne earlier. Hello, Brooklyn. Okay. That's a podcast in and of itself. What could have happened? What could have been if Hove really pushed? But anyway, and then again, I talked about Late Registration. Late.
Yeah.
One of the last, if not the last, no, it was one of the last tracks on there. Loved everything about where Ye was, because Ye was coming into his own. And again, I think we were getting a guy that knew himself and a guy that was really expressing himself. College Dropout gave him all the tools he needed to go, okay, I'm me and I'm doing me.
Yeah.
With all due respect to my big brother, Jay, with all due respect to what's going on over there with Dipset, with all due respect to, all things, I'm doing me.
Yeah.
And he damn sure did that. But my album, and you hinted at this, my album of the decade of 2000s, Lupe Fiasco, Food and Liquor. This is a no doubt, no brainer, not even a conversation classic for me. If you feel otherwise, anyone, if you feel otherwise, I'm always here for, healthy debates, man. I'm always here to hear, to have those conversations. Come for me.
Okay, well, why do you say Food and Liquor?
Food and Liquor.
I'm curious about this. You can't just skip over that.
Just might be okay. Kick Push.
That's a dope song.
I Gotcha.
That's a dope song.
Pharrell, of course, and when Pharrell is on, Pharrell is definitely, a different guy.
I Gotcha.
Daydreaming. Jill Scott.
Okay.
Love that woman. Love me some Jill Scott. I can just go on and on. Pressure. You know what I mean? With Hove got in there. American, I can go on and on and on. And I talked about this when
Sunshine on there.
Oh my God.
Stuff. Yeah.
Listen, man. Yeah. I talked about this with my album of the decade of the 90s, which was Talib Kweli, Mos Def, High Tech, Black Star. And the common thread between those two for me is, and again, I did the same thing in preparing for this podcast as I did preparing for that podcast, where I went back and listened to Food and Liquor twice, start to finish. I was putting in work. I was, working on some other projects, and so I had it playing. Clearly, you know, I mean, I was dialed in listening to it, and didn't skip one track. I didn't skip one track back then. And in the last few days preparing for this podcast, I did not feel the need to skip any track now. The album to me is, it's, I felt like lyrically, Lupe was at his best with the next one, The Cool. But I do not, as much as I love The Cool, it ain't Food and Liquor for me. Food and Liquor for me, it defined what everything that I wanted in hip hop, rap at that time. And again, we talked about the different tracks and where he could go, where it still came together and it still made sense.
Right.
Kick Push, Sunshine, completely different types of tracks.
Right.
But he was still handling his business. It was still that flow. It was still everything that, no matter what the subject matter was, no matter what the beat was, melodic, bars, whatever, there was never any dip in the quality in that album from start to finish. And again, listening to it here previously in the last couple of days, preparing for this podcast, I came away and I said, damn, this shit still goes in. And it's nearly what? It's over 10 years old, no doubt. And it's damn near what? 15 years old. Right? It gets it done. It got it done then. It gets it done now. Lupe Fiasco, Food and Liquor, my album of the decade of the 2000s. And I'm not even saying it's the best album of the decade of the 2000s. I'm saying the album that speaks to me the most, and it hasn't changed. Lupe Fiasco, Food and Liquor. Now, if we thought the album was tough, you know it's about to get a little tough.
You're gonna do songs.
No, I'm not gonna do songs. I'm not gonna do songs. I'm not gonna even do that to you. I couldn't, because I would have fucked around with songs and I'd have like mentioned one, and then I'd have been up to 12, 13, and I'd have told y'all like, fuck it, I can't shit, right? I can't do songs. Album was hard enough. I damn sure can't do songs. So I'm going in this direction. If you could only pick one, and we highlighted many of them, and they definitely, you know, had their mark. No question about it. Dre, your artist of the decade of the 2000s, and why?
And I'm just gonna listen to just their material alone.
Their material alone.
Nothing else.
Nothing else.
Going Fab. I'm going Fab. No Competition series. I definitely got to go with his mixtapes and things like that. Real Talk album in general was one of my favorite albums when I was in my teens. So adding that to
fabulous.
It, adding that to it, and like I said, just the No Competition series. The what was it? Death Comes in Threes.
Yeah, Death Comes in Three. Yes.
Yeah. Fab to me. I can understand people saying Wayne and things like that, but nah, from the mixtape side of everything, and even if you want to throw albums in there,
right,
it would have been Fab for me, because I did listen to a lot of Fab mixtapes at that time period. That was my joint, was just Fab everywhere. Fab, you know, Banks, but it would be Fab. Okay. I would be lying to myself.
Highly underrated, yet remains highly respected, and for good reason. Fabulous. I you know what? I didn't see that one coming, but you get no argument from me. I totally, completely understand where you're coming from. No question about it. For me, I thought about Wayne, and I thought about Kanye. I believe his first three albums are classics. I believe College Dropout, Late Registration, and Graduation are classics, and I believe that he really. And then obviously from a production standpoint, you know, and how he, you know, came in and, you know, produced everybody from Talib Kweli to Hove to just everybody. So I gave him serious consideration, but there was one individual that I put above him, Jay-Z.
Okay.
Blueprint.
Okay.
No one has ever had a debate about that being a classic album, because it is. My personal favorite live album, and I seriously thought about this, but because it was done live, I kept it out. Jay-Z Unplugged with the Roots.
Okay.
Roots, Hove, I got nothing else to say. Basically giving you his catalog up to that point, I think that was 2001 or 2002.
Yeah.
I don't even think Blueprint 2 had even dropped yet, so it had to be early 2002. Roots, Jaguar Wright, killer. Love her as a singer.
Yeah.
Still don't understand why she didn't really get her moment.
Yeah.
And Hove in this element, secure in this place. And this was the Hove that was coming out of, and this was an age-old hood question, and for some people it still is. If what happened to Biggie didn't happen to Biggie, does Jay-Z become the Jay-Z we know today? I still say yes. But there are those who say, unfortunately,
I still say
yeah. Big had to, Big passing allowed. I don't think when you talk about the way that this man has conducted himself, that you didn't have to allow Hove to do anything. I think Hove would have done Hove things regardless. And I felt like and the reality was, at the time that he was doing Blueprint, and at the time that he was doing Unplugged, and even going into Blueprint 2, and going into obviously the Black Album, there was still that was kind of that was out there. It was out there, and he knew it. He knew it. And I'm thinking Blueprint. I'm thinking Unplugged. Blueprint 2, which is not on that caliber, but again, quality, right? But it's not. It's not Blueprint. It's not Black Album. And Black Album. And then you know what? We talk about this, in sports. We talk about this in general. Knowing when to step away. Black Album, then he does Fade to Black. Still one of my favorite, documentaries to go back and watch. And then he steps away. And so that the top of that, Blueprint, Unplugged, Blueprint 2, good, not great, but still, and Black Album. And then he steps away. I'm seeing. What you got?
I'm just trying to figure out why you skipping your boys. Kel's and him. Best of Both Worlds was in here. Stop forgetting that. Okay. Stop forgetting Kingdom Come as well.
We'll get there.
I'm about to say, like, I'm listening, and I'm just like blown away right now. I respect it, but I'm like, Blueprint 2, all these things. I'm just like,
okay. So he steps away.
Okay.
And then he comes back with Kingdom Come. And when I look back on it now,
it's not a bad album.
It's not a bad album. It's not a bad album that it was made out to be, and for some still made out to be at this time. But it certainly was not. If you're gonna come back, it was Jordan wearing the 4-5. You saw enough to know it was still there, but you also saw more than enough to know, okay, wait a minute, we got some questions here.
That's what I'm saying.
But that was one of the main reasons why American Gangster, and I seriously, had put it up in my mind as a potential album of the 2000s, because of not only the quality of that album and how dope I think that shit is, but what it meant. Because American Gangster for Hove it was the only time that I can remember since he became Hove, late 2000s, Reasonable Doubt, Volume 1, but Volume 2, Volume 3. It was the only other time where I felt like there was some question going into American Gangster, like, okay, can he still? And then he came back with it.
I hear you. I
have Hove. And again,
I hear you.
You hear me.
I hear you.
But you ain't hearing me, man.
I hear you. I feel
what you got, man? What you got?
Okay.
Jay-Z decade of 2000.
I'm feeling. See, for Jay, it wouldn't be Jay for me, because I would have easily put Nas quicker than Jay for me. That would have just
for the decade or just in general.
I went with decade being Fab is in the 2000s. We're not thinking Fab is 90s.
No, we're not.
So if we just talking like that, I'm definitely throwing Nas over Jay on that. I'm definitely throwing Nas over Jay.
Not a conversation for you.
For me, it's not a conversation, but that's for me.
Okay.
That's for me. I know that's not popular right there at all. Okay. I can see shots being fired.
Yeah.
That's not popular.
Let me check the camera, make sure we ain't got no damage.
Real quick. But
all right, no, we good. We all right.
Because, like I said, Jay, the albums you mentioned, yes, besides the Unplugged one, I don't 100% agree with the Unplugged one, but fair enough. Some people do like that one. But yeah, Black Album, American Gangster, I don't get how people don't think that's a classic. I think that's a classic. Yeah, Kingdom Come that came out. Yeah, the Blueprint 2 come out. Yeah, Best of Both Worlds, not just one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
We'll flip to the Nas side. We had Streets Disciple. Come on.
Yeah.
It didn't need to be a double disc.
No.
If he just said, played it smart and pulled some songs out, would have been good.
We could have trimmed the fat on that.
Exactly. Hip Hop is Dead wasn't a bad album. I'm telling you, go back and listen to that again.
It's not.
You had the Untitled joint. You had Godson. You had Still Matter.
Godson, classic in my.
I think about 5 albums he put out.
Yes.
And out of those, I am going with the majority of Nas's albums on that. I think the only one I would not listen to, legit, out of the 5 I mentioned, would be Streets Disciples. I would not listen to that.
Any Nas joint in the decade of the 2000s.
For the 2000s?
Any Nas joint in the decade of the 2000s.
Yeah.
Would you put over Black Album?
Any
Nas album in the
tough.
decade of the 2000s, would you take out
That's tough.
Black Album and put in what?
I don't want to take out Black Album. That's unfair. That's unfair. That's unfair.
Okay.
That's unfair.
Blueprint.
I don't want to take out Blueprint either, though.
Oh, okay then.
I don't want to take out
So
Blueprint.
now you understand what I'm saying.
But that's where it is.
So Hole's got the first 2.
That's the first 2
In the draft. So you saying after that?
As much as I like American Gangsta, I could take American Gangsta out and I won't feel bad about it.
And what are you putting in? On from Nas?
From Nas, Still Matter.
Oh well, okay.
Take Kingdom Come out, put Godson in there.
Well, yeah. Okay.
Take all the R. Kelly joints out of there. Take all them out of there. Go ahead and throw the Untitled joint in there. I'll listen to that quicker. I'll listen to that. Like I said, out of that decade.
Goddamn, that happened.
Out of that decade, the only album that he put out that I would not really go back to listen to would be Streets Disciples. That I did not like that album. It was too long. Too many songs were on there. There was a few good ones, Moment. What was it? Just a Moment, I think it was, with him and Quan. The joint with him and Luda was Virgo. That was a good song. What's going on in my head now?
I felt like Hove came in, and he was clearly establishing himself.
Yeah.
Basically Black Album. We all knew what the program was. Came back. We had questions after Kingdom Come. Not that it was a bad album, but it wasn't what we had become accustomed to.
For that time period,
right?
It was a bad album for that time.
For that, yeah. I think it's over time. It's
gotten better.
Better.
But for the quality of what we were expecting from that man,
it wasn't
back for the time period of what it was, the sound that we
You know what it was? It was Mike and 45 losing to Orlando. Okay. Not that it was bad, but it was not. And then I felt like American Gangster was Mike in 96.
I can see that.
Well, coming back. Yeah. So it meant more because he was coming back from something versus everything just being, smooth for him. It wasn't gravy at that time.
Yeah.
I felt like he closed it out and we understood, like, okay, at this point, man, like your point is made. You know what I mean? Right. Do what you do. And all that said, I would say since American Gangster, in my book, he's only had one other classic, and that was 444. Blueprint 3 is not a classic. Magna Carta is not a classic. It's not even, both of them, you could say good, cool, but they're not.
Nah, nobody's talking about Magna Carta. Stop playing. Nobody's talking about Magna Carta. I can't remember the last time anybody ever mentioned Magna Carta, and they hyped that thing up.
Tom Ford.
The best thing you've ever heard. Like, come on, man.
Yeah,
Tom Ford was a cool song. I like that.
Okay,
song.
But look, fuck with me, I got it. But Ross, tell me that shit don't.
Yeah, but that's like what? Like 2 or 3 songs?
Yeah.
What's the rest?
Okay, so moving on.
Okay. All right.
Jay-Z, my artist of the decade of the 2000s. And that includes Best of Both Worlds. Yes, that happened. Moving on. Nah, man.
Yeah, that one slipped right past me too.
And listen, I already know going in, it happened with Volume 1 in the 90s. And so I know it's going to happen again in the 2000s. It's going to be, some joints, some albums, some artists. It's impossible, people. But we gave it to you, and we're looking forward to your feedback, man. I want to thank my man Dre for coming through. Thank you, brother, man. This was everything, man. Getting into all things hip hop in the decade of the 2000s. In my view, and before we even, do you believe, as I do, that the decade, and as my man Junior does, that the decade of the 2000s, if you take everything into account, is the best decade as far as music, albums, artists, just all things taken into account, the best decade of hip hop? You do not.
No, I don't.
So your decade, if you take everything into account, what is the best decade of hip hop for you?
Still say the 90s.
You still say the 90s.
Still the most influential.
Okay, yeah, no doubt the most influential.
It's still the most that means something.
Yes.
That means something. You cannot, first impressions, like we said before, that matters. And then when you change the entire spectrum of what your first impression was, which we know it was a hit, you change that entire perspective to NWA. Now moving into the 90s, where you start getting Nas lyrical content, you get Biggie lyrical content, and now we're talking about this guys who were making different songs for different types. You see what I'm saying? It's not just steady stream. When we got to the 2000 era, you had from early 2000s to about 2005, it was crunk music. That was the only sound that we heard the entire time. We had people doing dances everywhere. That was the big thing. What was it? Walk It Out, DJ We had all that. That was the vibe. So no, I'm not going to say that the 2000s era was. No, because it was all about dancing.
Now, let me ask you this.
About that crunk music.
My man Junior, you know, when we was talking about this on Volume 1, one thing that he brought up that was very important to him is that the production, the producers, the production that we got as far as the beats, it's basically just, you know what I mean, instrumental. Like the production in the decade of the 2000s really mattered to him and as something that stood out to him. Do you believe that the production?
I believe the production evolved. It evolved. I won't say it was better,
but it evolved. Okay, I got you.
Again, a lot of the stuff I feel like is going to be based off of your opinion on your region, because you may think it's the best era because of the fact that's when the South started popping off. It was 2000s. Of course, you may think this is the best era. It's like, oh, this is when the South really started going somewhere. From my perspective, I don't feel like that's the best era. To me, my perspective as someone from New York is this is when music started taking a backseat. Was the 2000s. Was the backseat era.
Okay.
Because the lyrical content and the messaging and what we were talking about was gone. That wasn't there. We was dancing everywhere. We was crunk music everywhere. We had Lil Scrappy. You remember? Yeah.
Come on, man.
We had Lil Scrappy. You see what I'm saying? We had
Body Shot, Lil Scrappy.
We had Nuck If You Buck.
Hit it, Pablo.
That's this type of stuff we had at the time. It was no more of what we were listening to with Nas and Jay when they were in their prime.
So are you saying we talked about that coming into the 90s, we were fighting, and by the end of the 90s, we knew that it set up what we got going into the decade of 2000s. Are you saying that what we saw in the decade of the 2000s really set up what happened in the 2010s into what we're dealing with now?
Yeah, I can see that.
Okay.
I can see that. I can see that being the setup for it. Because you gotta remember, it was, we were defending ours first. It was all about defending ours. Then we became the people on the block that we started confronting with each other. We started having issues with each other. Then 2000s era, we get to that. It became more of a flashy thing. It became more of the, the crunk movement, the mosh pits, things of that nature. It became more of just being that guy who had that bread, who was showcasing the rims, showcasing the jewels. That was the guy. You was the dealer. You was the dope boy.
Right.
You was that guy. And then we get to the 2000s, it went from us giving you the drugs. Now you are the drug addict. Now we did 2010s. You're the drug addict now. We gave you the drugs.
Yeah.
Because we rapped about it in the 2000s. We were your dealer. So I'm not surprised that you messed up in the 2010s because we gave you the drugs that you sound like this. That's why you popping mollies. I gave you the molly. You see what I'm saying? So no, I wouldn't.
Said that track be calling me, man.
Yeah, I had to say not to me. I wouldn't put the 2000s there. I'm not saying it doesn't have influential moments.
Right.
It does. It has plenty of them.
Right.
But we saw so many things become the downfall. Not saying some of the things that became a downfall were bad. I mean, we saw the downfall of the lyrical rappers. We can definitely say that.
Yeah, we can.
We had a lot of shovelware artists that came out around that time. That every single second there was some random dude you never heard of. They came from the South at the time, and they were from Atlanta. There's nothing wrong with that. We have a lot of classic, a lot of legendary dudes from there. But I remember when that scene started popping, it was every 2 seconds you had someone coming out from Atlanta and with some type of dance, some type of crunk, some type of whatever. the tall T phases and all that stuff. You know, it's them franchise boys, the finger snap era.
Yeah.
That was it. The finger snap era. That's what I was looking for. It was all that.
Right.
That's what it was. So if you take that all away, you have the downfall of lyricism, because that's why we had Nas and everybody saying hip hop was dead. Then we saw the downfall of the gangster rap. That died as well because of 2007 with 50 and Kanye. We saw downfalls of everything. And again, the ladder of the gangster rap part isn't such a bad thing. I'm not really pressed on it because I don't even do that myself. But it's just the sheer fact of what the content was.
Yes.
Dramatically changed in the 2000s. It was It's a decent era. I say it's a decent era, depending on what region you come from. If you're from the South, that's the best era ever. What? You can't tell me.
Depending on what you're looking for, and in your view, definitely depending on where you're coming from matters.
Exactly.
Particularly when you're talking about the decade of the 2000s, man.
Exactly.
You know what? We can go. Woo! We will leave it there for now because, we damn sure coming back to this. We damn sure will come back to this, man. But before we get up out of here, man, I definitely had to set aside some time. We got to talk about, I have been privileged over the last several years to watch you evolve, with your music, your sound, and particularly, your lyrics, man. You really, really, really have grown, have evolved, and that's what you want from any artist in any genre. Growth, evolution, and also authenticity, like it being you. Right. Definitely being influenced, as we all have been, but in the process, becoming your own man. And I've seen you do that with, your music and your content, and we got to be able to speak to that, man. So before we get up out of here, I'm going to turn it over to you, my brother. And you let the people know, man, like where you coming from, what your program is when it comes to your project and your shit. The floor is yours, man.
Well, musically, if you ever was to look me up, it's A. Reed, A.Reed, simple as that. Pretty much the music is just showing influence of my background, the influence of the music that I listen to. So you'll hear everything that I was just pretty much mentioning right now. You'll at least get a chance to hear it in the music that I put out. You can definitely attest to it yourself that the content there, it's varied. It's variety there, but that also goes to the people that I listened to growing up. Your Nas, your 50, your T.I.s, your Games. These guys also play a lot of factors to the type of music I do. Now, let's not get it twisted. I ain't out here shooting everybody. That ain't it. I'm grown. I'm grown. I ain't doing that. Right. I'm a grown man.
Poise.
It's that adult contemporary for real. It's definitely that.
Okay.
So if you like 90s hip hop, or if you like, 2000s hip hop, anything like that, it don't even really have to matter what era it is, because it's not really gonna. Some tracks may ever pull you to that moment, but it's not really that. It's still me. Mm-hmm. At the end of the day. So it's one of those type of things, man. It's all about presentation, and that's what it is. Quality. That's what I go for over quantity.
Absolutely.
I definitely got stuff. What I will definitely say before we do whatever, if you definitely want to hear some stuff, I definitely got IG, A Reed, A.Reed 9. SoundCloud is on there as well, so you can definitely get a chance to listen to some of the back catalog.
Yes.
It's still a work in progress. I don't like to just throw out random songs, because I feel like if you just do that, you're not really putting your best effort out, because you're not really hearing the song. After a while, it's just going to be going through. It's just like it's a cycle, Mm-hmm. So for me, I like to be able to take my time with it, make the projects that I make the songs that I do. Not to say I don't have my faster songs, but the ones that really can stick around, I take my time on.
Absolutely, man. Quality over quantity.
Well, I say one thing,
Absolutely.
If you don't mind if I...
Absolutely.
It's your space, obviously, and I'm proud of everything you're doing. Mm-hmm. Mind if I bring this out with a little bit of something, just to give them something to go out of?
Okay, all right. You know what? Yeah, man. Okay. Yes, sir.
I don't want to just jump in your space. You was in the mode. I was feeling it.
Let's go ahead and cue this thing.
I was here.
Let's cue
this
shit up. Okay, I wasn't expecting. Oh shit! Yeah. I wasn't expecting this. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is a bonus and damn sure a treat, man. My man Dre is going to hit you with
The one never changed, man. We're gonna do never change.
Never change. Let the people know, man. Let the people know what this is.
So this is one of the newer projects. I did this not too long ago, maybe about 2 weeks ago. It's still in the demo phase. It's still being worked on, polished up. But this is at least give everybody a chance to at least hear what I'm working on.
Absolutely, man. So we're gonna give you a little bit of this, and we definitely, want to know what your feedback is on this. And without further ado, my man, let's let them hear it.
All right, but.
That top down, I'm laid back. Roll a little bit if you're good with that. Take a shot after shot, there's no shells with that. Going round after round, we gon' run it back. Oh, they say don't ever change. No, could never change. That link for the split, you connect the chain. That eye for a team, no, it's not the same. That top down, I'm laid back. Roll a little bit if you're good with that. Take a shot after shot, there's no shells with that. Going round after round, we gon' run it back. Oh, they say don't ever change. No, could never change. That link for the split, you connect the chain. That eye for a team, no, it's not the same. That light is out, so that fire's out. Welcome all to my firehouse or fire station. Like some rebels, how we on the field, we might smoke a nation. If you hostile, get a facelift. And thank the Lord you kept your patient. The hospitals can't take no patients. Don't get put in for the wrong cases. Seeing things from a different view. That foggy glass can still get you through. Still medicated, I'm a healthy dude. Still educated, but dropped out of school. That wordplay can be a therapy. Watch me hold you down like I was gravity. But I'm crafty, B. How quick we'll see. That heat is on, you get a 3rd degree. That in and out job like a burgery. That different lifestyle, how it's supposed to be. That Robin Hood, of course, is me. Giving out the goods, my legacy. A classic move, my pedigree. Hit rock bottom, you'll never see. Just study the game, my mastery. You can see me do this after me. That top down, I'm laid back. Roll a little bit if you good with that. Take a shot after shot, there's no shells with that. Going round after round, we gon' run it back. Oh, they say don't ever change. No, could never change.
Quality over quantity. Can you just take a moment, man? We have to, and let the audience of Champions Material know about the background behind what they just heard.
So, background pretty much with the song concept is just a chill song. It's one of those type of songs that get you in a particular vibe, get you into your mode. Everybody has a particular way that they act. Everybody has a particular way that they move that people always accept them by. This is not to say that you got to stay a particular way, but there's a mode that everybody knows that they don't ever want you to change from. And you're a father, you know how it is. Your daughter looks at you in a particular light.
Yes.
She don't want you to change. That's a never change moment. So it's always talking about the positive things, not to change anything. But it's also forcing. It's also, talking, your stuff at the same time. You the best. That's essentially what it's all about. You the best. That's what the song is. That's usually what I try to do when I represent anything in any song. It's either going to be a story about something that might be going on, or it might be something that's going to be uplifting and empowering to you. Now, it's not going to be the gospel. I ain't going to do that. I'm not saying that there's nothing wrong, obviously, with that, but I'm not preaching. That's what I'm trying to get across. I'm not going to be preaching to you. It's going to be something that you can listen to. You can definitely vibe to it. And it's plenty more like that,
Man, consider it done. You heard it here first on Champions Material. As always, send any feedback to champions.materialsv@gmail.com. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Also, check out the official Champions Material YouTube channel. You all know we post episodes there as well as other select content. And never forget, whoever you want to be and whatever you want to be, always be the champion of it. That's Champions Material. Stay tuned. We'll be back sooner than later with our next episode. But now, we're done. Yes, sir. There we go. Top quality